This is a movie that has a lot of passion going into it, very clearly. There's a lot of artistic choices that I didn't expect, and it's a movie that is not quite living up to all its aspirations. Of course, everything you'd expect to be good in a big tentpole summer blockbuster superhero franchise type of movie is good. The cinematography is solid, the color grading is great, the acting is great, the music's great, everything from a technical standpoint is pretty dang good. The problem is the story and the characters are weird. It's not necessarily bad, they just don't quite come across the way I think Todd Haynes wanted them to. Arthur Fleck's in prison, and the majority of the film is a court procedural trying to decide if he's guilty or not for the homicides he committed in the first film, which is one of the first interesting parts about it. That court procedural aspect of it almost feels, whether intentionally or not, as if this film is dissecting the first film and the response to the first film.
I haven't done anything with my life like you have.
Which is a unique take for this movie and a unique perspective, especially because one of the biggest aspects of it is that people in it aren't who they seem. One of the biggest thematics of it is that these people, these main characters, Lady Gaga and Arthur Fleck, and even the assistant DA, Harvey Dent, in this, are essentially two-faced people. Harvey Dent literally becomes two-faced, and Joker, or Arthur Fleck, is playing this role of, he's Arthur Fleck, this delusional, mental head case guy, and Joker, who's, you know, the Joker. He's a flamboyant, he's crazy, he's over the top. And then you have Lady Gaga, who is playing Harley Quinn, and Harley Quinn is a super rich, kind of spoiled girl who intentionally goes to a rehab center to meet Joker. So there's some interesting dynamic going on there. It's these two-faced people that are living these lies that ultimately kind of comes and bites them in the ass at the end, which I think is intentional. I just don't know, because this movie isn't clear about what it is or what it really wants to be. Instead, it's this very long, drawn-out court procedural intercut with these scenes in prison, with these music numbers that have almost no artistry at all to them. There's one scene where he's imagining them on the top of a building and they're dancing with Arkham behind them. There's not really much there, and that also leads into his fantasies he's constantly having during the film about what he wants to be, who he is, who he thinks Harley Quinn is, all this stuff, and it's just a little too much to digest. It's a strange film because it takes such a different approach to the material than even the first one did. The first one's pretty much a straight-up drama about a guy who has been abandoned by the system, who's fed up with being thrown away, who's fed up by being an incel and wants to take action. It's essentially a deconstruction and almost a parody of these incel-type people that commit horrible, horrible atrocities, which we've seen all too common in the modern era, and it's sort of a lampoon of that person, what creates that person, what kind of a joke that person becomes in their own lives. And then in this one, it's like Arthur Fleck is more or less just a pawn in this scheme of a court procedural that's only really here to show how grossly narcissistic Arthur Fleck's character is and how actually mentally unwell he is. And that's a big part of the film, is that they're trying to figure out whether he is actually just mentally unwell or if he has a fractured psyche. What the world needs now. Is he Arthur Fleck and the Joker, or is he Arthur Fleck playing the Joker and is just sick? That's a big part of this too, but it just doesn't go anywhere that's satisfying. The ending of the film is essentially him waking up to the fact that he is just sick and regrets some things that he did, and once that happens, he loses all of his support, which is sort of an interesting idea. I just don't know what the point is. It's the point that he made this big stand, and he got all these people on his side because he stood up for the little guy. He stood up for everybody that's been abused and tossed aside. And then once he realized that he was just kind of a horrible, horrible person that was delusional, everybody that was also delusional left him because they still were. I don't really know. But then also, like, why? What does this help? What does this do? What is this saying? I just don't understand it. And I completely understand if somebody were to say, you just didn't get it, to me, because I feel like I didn't. It's a movie that has so much in it that feels important, that feels as if it has something to say, and then it just kind of amounts to a hill of beans.
I want to see the real you.
I don't know. And the biggest issue is that it's 2 hours and 20 minutes nearly, and it's one of the dullest superhero movies I've seen in recent memory. It's just Arthur Fleck wandering around between scenes and people talking at him. He's such an inactive character in this movie that it becomes very tiring. He's at a prison, and then Lady Gaga does things so that he does things, and then he's at a court and people do things around him, and the court explodes at one point. He doesn't really do anything. Things just sort of happen in a whirlwind around him, and I don't know if that's also the point, where his life is completely out of control and everyone around him is just trying to manipulate and use him for their own personal gain. Maybe that's part of it too, but I don't just, like, why? It's so strange. And for a movie as long as it is, it feels so thin, which is so disappointing. I really expected this to be something so much more grandiose. A superhero villain origin story follow-up that's a musical is such an interesting idea for this movie. And then it's just like, every musical number is just him singing in a one shot and then like cut to like a medium occasionally. It's so dull looking at times, especially during the musicals when you'd expect some flair, and there just isn't any. It's so bizarre. And for a movie following up Joker, which was this big cultural moment, this feels like it has no footprint at all.